everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Music City Surrey Showcase, Volume 2. This is where we highlight the talent that Surrey has to offer. And today we're joined by a very special guest. We're going to learn a lot of cool stuff today. We're joined by Jim Hopson. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Myles. Yeah, cheers.
So let's just get the elephant out of the room, first of all, because I'm sitting next to, we're going to kind of go in a bunch of different directions, but just so you're aware of what's going on here, Jim walked in a mere probably half hour ago, and he's a low brass player, and he comes in with this instrument. And Jim, before you kind of give us a little bit of bio and stuff, why don't you give a quick explanation of what this instrument is for people?
Sure. So this is an Alp horn, sometimes known as an Alpenhorn, or for anybody who's listening who speaks French, Cor des Alpes. And it's a folk instrument from Central Europe, predominantly Switzerland, but also parts of southern France and Germany and northern Italy, Austria. Think, the Sound of Music kind of alpine country. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially a 12-foot long wooden horn with no keys or valves of any kind.
Okay.
Yeah. And this particular instrument was made by my dad.
Okay, cool.
Bill Hopson in Calgary, Alberta. And it's an ancient instrument. It's got about a 2,000-year history in Central Europe. Historically, it was used for communication.
Okay.
If you imagine, if you've ever been to Switzerland.
I have, actually. I was there just this year in Zurich.
Oh, yeah, in Zurich. Beautiful. Yeah, gorgeous country. So the whole country is just mountains and then valleys.
Yeah.
Right? And the, beautiful villages in these valleys.
Yeah.
And, of course, back in the day, this being mostly rural, how did you communicate from valley to valley? Well, you could send a letter, you could hop on a horse, so you could trudge through the snow, or you could pull out your Alp horn and you could play a little call on your Alp horn.
Well, there you go. Well, that's the Alp horn. I mean, we're going to learn a lot more about the Alp horn, and we're going to get Jim to actually play the Alp horn as well. But now that everyone's curiosity has been satisfied to a certain extent, Jim, tell me more about your musical journey. How did you start? Let's just give a quick, brief history of the musical career of Jim Hopson.
Oh, thank you. Well, so I grew up in Calgary, Alberta.
Okay.
And when I turned 18, I moved out of Calgary because I didn't like the snow very much, and I came over here.
Fair enough.
But my parents are both symphony musicians.
Okay.
They played in the Calgary Philharmonic. That was their job. My mom's a beautiful cellist. And my dad is a second French horn player. Okay. And Dad also, when I was a kid, he took up the Swiss Alp horn. In fact, he ended up going to Switzerland and competing in and winning all the international Alp horn competitions. In Switzerland.
Oh, wow.
And actually became an Alp horn maker, too. He made about 150 of these things through the 80s and 90s before he retired.
That's super cool. And then so you grew up in this household, all this music's happening. Yeah. So when did you decide to get your feet wet?
It was sort of a roundabout way. Like I was always in, I took Kodai classes when I was a kid, and I was really into singing when I was a kid, into singing in choirs. I was really kind of into that. Mm-hmm. And then kind of hockey took over for a little while. You know what I mean?
I was the exact same way. I get it. And then you have to make time for both. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I actually, you know what? I kind of quit the music thing between ages like 10 to, I want to say like 14 or 15, maybe 16.
Okay. Yeah.
But then when I was in high school, they needed trombone players for the high school jazz band. So they had a trombone player, they had a trombone that they could loan me over the summer, and I just kind of brought it home and kind of figured it out a little bit and started feeling really passionate about music again. And that led to starting to practice like 8 hours a day and really being into this, and then eventually going to study at UVic to get a bachelor's degree in orchestral trombone, but jazz trombone was sort of my first passion. Yep. And then I met my wife at UVic, who's a wonderful violist and a music teacher in Surrey. Mm-hmm. She teaches at Coyote Creek Elementary in Surrey.
Nice.
And so we moved to Vancouver and just started freelancing, playing lots of gigs with a lot of different orchestras, artists, bands, and it's been a ride ever since.
That's awesome to hear. And I mean, every time I see someone playing a trombone, I think to myself, that's got to be the the hardest instrument to play. Like I can't wrap my head around the trombone. I can't seem to wrap my head around it. So to have that as the main instrument, I find it very cool. Like
there's something like really vocal about the trombone.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like well, Keely over here is a bassist. It's like playing fretless bass guitar.
Yeah.
Right. There's or any kind of fretless string instrument. There's the expressiveness you can create with the trombone that is so vocal that really resonates with me. I do play valved brass instruments as well, like tuba and euphonium and stuff like that. Those are great too. You know, it's a weird thing. You know, playing a brass instrument, the technique behind it. It's a strange thing. Have you ever tried playing a trumpet or something like that? I mean,
it's funny you asked. So there was one time when my band was on tour, we were with an artist, touring with an artist. Her name's Chersey, and she's a pop artist, but every once in a while she brings out her trumpet.
Cool.
And we were passing it around, and I actually like grabbed it, and I've just heard that you just need to do like
Pretty
that
much.
kind of thing, right?
Pretty
And
much.
I did it, and a big note came out, and everyone was like, how did you do that? So that's the only experience I've had with anything brass, and it was difficult.
It's a pretty nutty thing. You know, the way I explain this to people sometimes. What I do for a living is I blow musical raspberries.
Oh,
so,
okay.
for example, basically it's involved controlling your air and controlling your lip muscles to the point where you can, and I hope this doesn't peak the mic a little bit, but
If it does, we'll fix it. Wow.
it's just musically controlled lip vibrations. Blowing faster air to play higher notes,
Yep.
blowing slower, warmer air, to play lower notes.
Okay.
And there's also some flexibility, but it's a very strange thing to do, right?
Yeah, it's
You know?
not very what's the word I'm looking for? It's just not it's not something you would usually do, right? It's just not it's a very unusual sensation.
Think about it. I mean, for us as human beings, is there any evolutionary advantage in being able to
Yeah.
control the pitch of your lip vibrations like that?
Yeah.
Whereas, being able to, work with your fingers and yes, there's definitely an advantage in that. We're geared toward that.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, very, very cool stuff. So in terms of when you're growing up, you got into trombone and everything. Was there any certain inspiration or any like artists you would like music you would listen to, like play along to, anything like that?
Absolutely. I mean, the first inspirations would of course be my parents because I grew up listening to them practice.
Yeah.
Especially mom playing the Bach cello suites.
Okay.
Those just really resonate. That kind of counterpoint.
Yeah.
But in terms of the trombone, the first artist that really grabbed my attention, Ian McDougall, who is sort of a Canadian legend in the trombone community. He was the lead trombone player with Rob McConnell's Boss Brass.
Okay.
He was the top call studio trombone player in Canada for years and years.
Okay.
It's kind of a funny story about this. So
Let's hear it.
I had heard, and I had heard through my dad that this great trombonist Ian McDougall was going to come and play at this bar in Calgary. Because he had grown up in Calgary or something, and this is the middle of the winter, and he was like, "This guy's in town. You got to go see this. You're into the trombone. You got to go see this guy." Okay, so I bundle up in my parka and I got my trombone and I go down to this bar. I'm 16, 17 years old or something like this, right? And I get down to the bar and the band's all set up. They wouldn't let me in. I wasn't of age, right?
Oh, okay.
So I'm hanging out outside the bar, a little forlorn, in the snow, in the cold, -20, bundled up, and this old man comes and taps me on the shoulder. And he says, "Sonny, what are you doing here?" They won't let me into the bar. He said, "No problem." This guy leads me around the side, in through the back door, through the kitchen, sits me down at this table with, "Oh, these are some friends of mine. They'll take care of you." Buys me a beer and a scotch. Then he takes his own trombone out of the case and goes up on stage and proceeds to play the most beautiful jazz trombone I've ever heard in my life. And that was Ian McDougall.
That was Ian McDougall.
That was Ian McDougall.
What
that was
a
the guy.
great story.
Great guy. And he sat me down at a table with some of his former students.
That's awesome.
And I was really, really lucky that I got to actually study with Ian for several years at UVic. He was my teacher at UVic. So I got to an incredible experience of getting to study music with my greatest trombone inspiration.
And it all started from that one moment at that bar.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I mean, and this is a lesson for any musician, like, you know, to I think, because he was so generous and so kind to a young trombonist. Then, first of all, at that gig, I bought every album that he had. I spent my whole allowance on trombone CDs.
Yeah.
And just listening to these things, and his approach to the trombone is really the approach of a singer.
Mm-hmm.
He does that better than anybody in the world. Mm-hmm. And then also a great trombonist who passed away recently, Hugh Fraser.
Okay.
Who was a Canadian jazz icon. And he also taught at UVic. He was the director of jazz studies there. Mm. And I remember listening to that guy playing at festivals back in the day, just the energy, the enthusiasm. So I would say those would be the two big inspirations.
That's really cool. I love that, the story. That, I mean, the fact that you're able to tie your inspiration down to such an engaging story is so cool. So we're going to come back to this just for a second.
Great.
So when did the Alphorn, I mean, obviously your dad was an Alphorn maker. He was all about the Alphorn. When did you decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to try it out. And what was the process of learning it like?
Good question. That's a great question. Well, you know, I just sort of I grew up around the Alphorn, right? And kind of around brass instruments too. But, yeah, I think my dad probably had me play it a few times, just make some sound on it as a little kid, right? You know, I never really took formal lessons from Dad. I think that doesn't really work very well sometimes, like when it's within the family, you know what I mean? But I always heard him. Like he was always practicing, and I listened to him practicing Alphorn out in the shop, and I still remember all these Alphorn melodies that he would be practicing out there. They're just burned into my brain. You know, even before I was really playing music. You know, it's the same technique really as playing a trombone or a trumpet, right? Is an Alphorn. And the technique just sort of transfers. So I just always played it. Like through high school, I played a few Alphorn solos with the concert band. In university, I played it at my grad recital, and then it just kept going. And it was always something I kind of did a lot, well, a little bit, like on the side, a sideline. And then about 10 years ago, I joined this band, this really great band called the S-Bond Band. Okay. And we're actually in the middle of a tour right now. We're a hardcore Oktoberfest band. Okay. That's the gig. We tour around the Pacific Northwest and sometimes down in Texas and places like that, playing Oktoberfest. And the conversation kind of went like this. Oh, well, hey, we heard you play some trombone and some tuba and you know, and some Swiss Alphorn. Yeah, we might want you to join the band, but I don't know. I think we need something else. Well, so then I say, well, okay. I speak some German, so I can sing backing vocals in the band too if you want. That's fine. They're great. Yeah, what we really need is a bassist because they do like rock and roll covers. You know, I think we're playing Tom Sawyer on a gig. Okay, and some Rush. I'm like, well, I don't really play bass. Sorry, go to the next. Well, they say we have a bass. We could loan you if you can figure it out in a month how to play a classic rock gig on bass. You got the gig. So I freaked out a little bit, and it's a great gig. It's a great band. Yeah. So I added bass, and with that touring also came the opportunity to really kind of develop the Alphorn side of things, and to start exploring like the limits of what the instrument can do. So, for example, I play like blues shuffles on this thing. Okay. We do very technical, like extreme register things with this. And really a lot of that was just sort of stuff I figured out from years and years of gigging with this band and being surrounded by great colleagues that I trust and being able to take risks. You know, I think that's when I really started getting interested in it. There are a few adjustments you have to make as a brass player coming to the Alphorn. Good brass playing does not necessarily make for good Alphorn playing. Gotcha. I teach at a lot of Alphorn workshops all over the world, in the United States in particular, but also in Europe sometimes. And a lot of the people who pick up the instrument are like trombone players or trumpet players, and it's different. It's different. There's no in a brass instrument, you have this thing called a lead pipe. It's a double sort of taper right at where the mouthpiece goes in.
Yeah.
That kind of helps the notes sort of center and slot. The Alphorn doesn't have that. It's just a straight expansion. So that it's very much less secure.
Gotcha.
The instrument's helping you less. At the same time, because it's less secure, it's more flexible. So the way you connect notes and the way you blow through notes is much more free on the Alphorn. It's a very high risk, high reward kind of instrument.
I like that. High risk, high reward instrument.
I think that's, and for me, that's like a philosophy, I think, for music making. High risk, high reward.
Absolutely.
Go for it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the same thing. I mean, I mean, that's kind of my life philosophy in a sense, where it's just like, if you're not taking risks, you're not truly living life. And to have that kind of metaphor apply to the musical instrument it's such a great way to look at it as well. So another thing I want to ask you is just kind of like, what's on the horizon for you? What kind of gigs are you playing right now? I guess we have the Oktoberfest coming up. So what else do you have going on?
So it's a weird thing. I work on a lot of different scenes, right? Like I play extra with the Vancouver Symphony, so I'm doing that on Sunday. But Saturday night and Friday night, I'm going to be in Wenatchee, Washington, playing the Oktoberfest there with the S-Bahn Band.
Nice.
And then I'm working with the Symphony next week. We're doing a tribute to Queen. Which is going to be great, and a few other things. Yeah, that's a wonderful organization, the Vancouver Symphony.
Oh yeah, I saw. I think it was a Chopin show. I can't remember, but I went earlier this year. My friend invited me, and it was just I had never been before, and I was just like, oh, it was so amazing, and I plan to go back. So I'll have to send you an email or something, let you know when you're playing that, so I can see you play. I would love that.
Sure, yeah. I play extra with them, so when they need an extra trombonist, I get called for a lot of the pop shows.
Okay, cool.
The jazz swing stuff, and it's always it's such a privilege to play with that group. There's so many great artists there. And then I'm doing the Oktoberfest. Pretty much that's kind of my thing until November. After that, I've got, I just actually kind of got hired for this kind of big gig I can't really talk about yet.
Okay, well, we won't hound you over it.
The ink isn't quite dry yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's going to be an eight show a week kind of thing at a local theater here, which should be fun.
Very nice.
And just really looking forward to that. And then, of course, Christmas parties, a little more work with the symphony over December. And then I'm hoping finally in January to have some time off to maybe do some recording.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to a few releases.
Okay.
For sure. The S-Bahn Band, we do have an album coming out sometime soon. Hopefully after the tour we can get that together.
Sounds good.
And a good friend of mine, Dan Herzog, who's a jazz composer, arranger in town here, who's on faculty at Cap College. We recorded his big band album this past spring.
Awesome.
It was a band that was half from New York, half from Vancouver, and we put this together at the Warehouse Studio.
Okay.
Downtown.
Downtown.
You ever been there?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, done a couple drum sessions there. Yeah.
Whoa! What a joint, man!
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And you don't even know it's there. You look at it from the outside. And
I mean, most studios, you kind of have to have that.
Well, exactly.
You don't want anybody in there.
What a room, though, and like the microphone collection alone, just insane.
Yes.
But we recorded it down there, and I'm really looking forward to this thing coming out.
Awesome. Is there? Sorry, go ahead.
Shout out to my man Dan Herzog.
Awesome.
If you listen to this here.
Is there a release date for that yet? Anything we can look out for? Or
I haven't heard anything about that, but I will let you know.
Okay.
Once I do.
Perfect. Sounds good. And the last question I have for you, Jim, I've really enjoyed this conversation. This has been
Likewise,
awesome.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll ask is if you had one piece of advice for artists that were just either starting out or, just any piece of advice, really, something that could help out an artist or a musician, what would you say?
I got some really great advice from a lady named Louise Rose, who's a jazz singer, pianist, sort of Canadian icon, I would think. She worked with my high school jazz band, and at the time, I was having a little bit of a confidence crisis because I was about to graduate from university, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to make a living at this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How am I going to put food on the table, but at the same time enjoy what I want to do for a living, do a career. This is what I want to do. And after the show she did with our band, she took the whole band out for dinner. And the thing she said to me that really resonated was, do what you love and the money will come. That was really comforting. And I sort of feel like I've tried to live by that with a little modification. Do what you love really, really, really well. Put your whole heart and soul into that. Put a lot of your time into that. Put in your 10,000 hours. And the money will come. You know, the music industry is a tough place to make a living. And there are occasions where, you do your very best. You do put in, and it doesn't work out.
Yep.
And then there will be, but if you keep doing it, if you're on that track, eventually you're going to find some success. You're going to feel like you're failing over and over and over and over again. That's a feeling you got to get used to.
Yeah.
But putting yourself out there, doing what you love, eventually you're going to come to a place where you're finding success in the midst of all those failures.
Oh,
that's what it is.
That's a beautiful piece of advice.
You put 10 musicians in a room, and I guarantee you the most skilled musician in that room is going to be the one who's practiced the most, worked the hardest, therefore failed the most, made the most mistakes, but learned from them.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important modification you're putting on that. Do what you love really, really well. Because some people, they just want to do what they love. They think they can just mosey their way in and feel all entitled and just get what they want instantly and without putting in the 10,000 hours that you're talking about. And it's so, so important that you're passionate about it, that you're putting your all into it, as you say. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap this up. Jim, if anyone wanted to learn more about you, is there anything you want to plug, any lessons or social medias or anything at all?
Sure.
Yeah.
You can find me. I do have a YouTube channel called Chops with Hops, which I post low brass tips. I post the occasional, pop music cover, things like that on trombone. You can also follow me. I have a website, phonosmusic.com. That's an anagram for Hopson, phonosmusic.com, PHONOS. And you can also find me on Facebook, Jim Hopson Trombone. You put that in, that'll be the thing that pops up.
Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much. And now we're going to let you build the Alphorn, and we're going to get a good listen to what this thing sounds like. So for those of you watching, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Music City Surrey Showcase, and we'll see you in the next episode.